Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Spiritual Spiral. I am one of your hosts, Sam Davidson, of course, joined by my beautiful and amazing friend and co-host, Sari Cohen.
Hi,
And
everyone.
our special guest this week is Olivia Halliday, and she is a lot of things: a lover, a teacher, a listener. But you'll understand what all that means once we get into talking about what she does. So thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I'm doing great. I am psyched to see your faces and have some real-time conversation in this moment. So thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
I was just saying I'm having a glass of wine today because I was watching Olivia's live yesterday, which was amazing, and she was sharing a glass of wine with her girlfriend. I felt like I was right there. I felt like I was right there with you.
Yeah.
Sit down today. I'm just going to pour myself a glass of wine and enjoy being present with the two of you. So
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. I have water today. Cheers to that too as well, you know.
And some LaCroix.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, I love that mug, Sam. That's beautiful.
Oh yeah, my mom buys all this weird random shit, so it's one of those things. Okay, well, first of all, I want to talk about how you work and what is a medicine wheel, because I know that's a big part of what you do, and it's something that I had never heard of until I connected with you.
Yeah. Okay. So great questions, two very different questions, and they ultimately feed into each other. So one of the things that I guess we'll start with is, you know, when Sari was saying, you know, I had a glass of wine, I was watching your live, and it felt like I was right there with you, like with your girlfriends on the couch doing your thing. And so that is one way in which I work. That's one way in which I do what I do. And I said something along these lines to you just a moment ago, that everything is prayer and everything is ceremony. And that is a teaching that was provided to me through a Navajo elder when I was part of this group of people that were building a sweat lodge in the backyard of one of, you know, my grandmother's homes. And I say grandmother because she is a Navajo elder. She's not my blood grandmother, but she is one of my spiritual grandmothers and teachers. So that's a nod to another way in which I work, which is I have been gifted, and I mean truly gifted, the opportunity to work with a variety of teachers of a variety of spaces and places. So we're talking like metaphysical, like fifth dimensional, you know, gurus and teachers, and we're talking like Mexica medicine women, Navajo medicine men and women, you know, Celtic, you know, high priestesses. So my path, in addition to then my own gifted, skills and nuances, my path has been one of a variety. And so that ultimately leads us to this question about what is a medicine wheel. And a medicine wheel is a style of living. Medicine wheel is a metaphorical walk. The phrasing is always, you know, walking the wheel. So it's a metaphorical walk that speaks to how we exist and how we commune and how we are in relationship to our surroundings. So, you know, back in the day, like way back in the day, we're not talking like early 90s back in the day, we're talking like, you know, we're talking about like generations ago, indigenous people had to live in communion with the land. They had to live in communion with their natural surroundings, with the seasons, with the animals, with the planets, all of this. And what they started understanding was the nonverbal energetic flow that goes through everything, including themselves as the human beings. And so when you honor the four seasons, those end up correlating with the four main elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And those also speak to four directions, which are the places where the seasons shift, the equinoxes and the solstices. So there's a lot of really beautiful layering to a medicine wheel existence. And ultimately the point of it is to learn how to be in deeper relationship with everything that you do and everyone that you interact with, which is why it's just as medicinal to sit on the couch with your like homegirl as a healer, drinking a glass of wine and talking really candidly, but also knowing that at the same time, we're doing some very, very deep and important work. And that's ultimately what I do, is I bridge the gap between our like physical existence and our spiritual existence.
I'm curious, since you brought up seasons, and this just kind of popped in my head, Why do certain people connect to certain seasons?
That's a great question. Certain people connect to certain seasons. So what comes forward in that is the elemental representation. So in a medicine wheel, what I had mentioned was each season is related to an element. And depending on how we are designed, and I mean designed like energetically, emotionally, spiritually, I mean, really anything that we get into, our astrological signs, the zodiac has this, oh, this is a fire sign, this is an air sign, et cetera, et cetera. So we end up relating to certain seasons based on our elemental representation. So if we are kind of a heady person, if we're really thought oriented and we're into the processes of things, that is an air element representation, because if you think about air and the wind, that's like things swirling around. So think of like a mad genius with all of these ideas and things coming on, like these new possibilities. That is also related to then springtime, because what is happening in springtime? Spring is really windy and new things are blossoming, babies are being born, like there's a lot of newness and freshness. So that is an air element representation, and that might be why someone responds more to the energetics and the frequency of that season, if that makes sense.
I just want to interject here for a second, because it's so funny. I have this memory, 2 girls I used to be friends with. I'm not anymore, which you'll probably maybe understand after this little story. But we went to Palm Springs for the weekend, and it was really windy. And I said something like, I love the wind. It excites me so much. And they wouldn't stop making, the wind excites you? It excites you? And I was like, yes, it really excites me. And I'm an air sign. So I'm a Libra. And it was just like, they thought I was such a crazy, that the wind, I'm like, why wouldn't the wind excite you? It means like things are happening, like things are moving, and it's so exciting.
Yes, that's such a great awareness, Sam, because that is exactly it. There is something about your energetic chemical sort of DNA that says, hey, this is a vibration, this is a frequency that makes sense to me. And when we're talking about seasons and why things relate differently to us, think about it like a radio. Like sometimes we're in a really heady space, so we're like tuning into that frequency, that station. Sometimes we're in a more fiery space, so we're tuning into that frequency and that station. Water, earth, et cetera, there. And the whole point of it is to understand that we are, while we may have an affinity towards one particular element or season, we really are the entire wheel. And we cycle through and we move in and out of those spaces all the time, like all day long, all week long, all year long, our entire lifetime. We cycle through this constantly, and it provides us a better sense of presence and connection to everything around us.
That's so interesting, because I'm such a summer girl. Like I'm sunshine. I feel I would celebrate May 31st as my New Year's. There's something that happens June 1st where I all of a sudden come alive. But I feel like it's cyclical too. Like there are things that happen throughout the year that seem to repeat in the seasons. It's very odd. And I don't know if it's like that for everyone, if everybody experiences the same transformation or the same transformative things at different times of the year. But there definitely seems to be a cycle as to when things happen. And I did notice it's shifted too. Like I got to a certain age where the seasons kind of shifted for me, or the things that happened, but it does seem to be repetitive.
Very much so. I mean, Sam, would you agree with that? Can you notice like cyclical, things in your world, whether it's relationships, jobs, just experiences?
Well, it's funny that you said spring, because honestly, spring is probably my least favorite season, and I don't know why. And I feel like I have had issues with like losing jobs in the spring, health issues in the spring. And there was one point, like I sliced my hand open on a tuna can and literally sliced my tendon. It was disgusting and terrible. And that was one year in the spring. And then the next year around the same time, I was dancing around my apartment, just watching The Voice, having a nice time. Literally, and I did a spin. This is crazy. I did a spin and I freaking broke my foot. And they called it a dance. There's like, are you a dancer? This is a dancer's break. This is what ballet dancers usually get. And I was like, I guess you could call me a dancer, I suppose. But
maybe not professionally, but in my living room I am.
And that's what I was doing. And so it was those two things. And then also I had job issues around the springtime too. And so, yeah, I'm interested that, you know, that is kind of like more connected to the wind and air and all of that, because that's what I am. So am I not in alignment? You know, like, what does that mean?
Okay, so I love that you're asking this question, and I also want to, for whatever reason, this is what's coming forward, is like you were spinning. So you were literally the embodiment of a cyclical experience, and your ship broke. You know what I mean? This is like, you know. So a couple of things come forward there, and so the first thing, you know, the fact that you broke your foot, our feet and our legs are an extension of our root chakra. So that speaks to our foundation. It speaks to our sense of grounding, you know, where we feel we belong, what we believe our space in this world is. Sometimes when there are issues with our feet or with our legs, it's indicative of like family of origin issues, or even our current home life, you know, issues. So that's one piece, and we'll kind of put that there, and we'll circle back around to that in a moment. And so when you say, there seems to be trouble in the springtime for me, what I am going to offer to you to consider is that if we are not accepting of who we are and how we do what we do and how we roll through life, we will continue to like be brought to attention in those spaces and places. So if there is a discomfort in the springtime, what I hear in that ultimately is there's something about the way you do what you do, Sam, that you're still not accepting. And so that will prevent your foundation from being really stable, AKA why your foot broke. It's like, you know, the universe, AKA your body, because while we live in this universe, we also are the universe. Your universe is letting you know, hey sis, there's some ways in which you are viewing yourself and the way that you roll through life, and in actuality, your genius and your skill set, your pre-designed skill set that you are amazing at, that maybe you're not allowing to really be and come to fruition.
Yeah. And, you know, I will say that that was all like I think the past 2 or 3 springs, maybe 2, I've been like, yes, like I made it to summer and nothing bad happened to me. But, you know, it's always a very interesting time because like I love the fall too, and I love this, you know, I love seasons, which is one of the reasons why it's kind of nice to be back in Ohio right now. I'm enjoying the summer though. I wanted to circle back around a little bit just to the logistics of this medicine wheel. And I know you teach and you have these like, you know, classes and things that you do on your website. Like, what is, like, physically, what is doing the medicine wheel? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yep, great question. So walking a medicine wheel with me is an entire year-long process. So that is the initial container, is that if someone or when someone opts in to walking the wheel with me, you are committing to an entire year-long experience, because as I said, 4 seasons, 4 directions, all of that stuff. So when you commit to that, what happens is that every month there is a very particular teaching that is specific to that month and the related element, the related direction, north, south, east, and west. It provides you with some activities and some homework, sometimes depending upon the month and depending upon what it is, some more direct interaction with me, you know, for questions and for processing, things of that nature. Because this really is, it's a completely different way of viewing ourselves and our world than what we're used to. You know, we're used to time as being very linear, like flat, straight line. This is the future, that's the past. Like that's what humanity is conditioned to perceive time as. And medicine wheel is intended to break that and help you view it, as we've talked about, in a much more cyclical way. So from a logistical perspective, it's a year-long program, and that program consists of monthly teachings, ritual, ceremony, homework, activities, all designed to help like decalcify some of the very linear thought process and open yourself up to a more feminine expression. And I don't mean feminine as in just women, but feminine energy, expression of moving and flowing with the energetics of our natural world.
Cool.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I was going to ask you about that because last night you were talking about feminine and masculine energy.
Yeah.
So can you break that down a little bit more and kind of, I guess, just repeat a little bit of what you were saying? I was so intrigued. I was totally taken with what you were saying.
For sure, for sure. So, and this for me has been a paramount teaching that once I kind of got a grasp of this, again, I was better able to understand how I'm showing up, how other people are showing up, how it really helped me navigate through my life in a way that was not so strenuous and like attached and like angst ridden. So the breakdown real quick is that masculine and feminine energy is most commonly known as the yin and yang symbology, right? So like we all are pretty familiar with that circle. It's like black and white, and there's like a little swirl in the middle, and there's a little bit of black in the white, a little bit of white in the black, et cetera, et cetera. So the teaching of masculine and feminine energy and that yin and yang symbol is from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint. So it's an Eastern theology. And what it talks about is that energy, in order to have a whole experience, a whole energetic expression, we do this dance of masculine and feminine energy. Again, this is not gender. This is not about sex. This has nothing to do with how you identify, none of that. But what is important to know is that all beings, all living things express and embody both masculine and feminine energy. So a more masculine expression, first of all, the masculine energy is like the white part of the circle. And masculine energy is about outward expression. So right now I'm talking, so I'm being very masculine because I'm moving and I'm speaking and I'm sort of going outward. The two of you are being more feminine because you're listening, you're receiving, and you're taking it in. Feminine energy is the black part of the circle. So, you know, easy ways to understand or conceptualize it is that daytime is masculine, nighttime is feminine. Inhaling, you know, and sort of filling up is feminine. Exhaling is masculine. Sleeping is feminine. Being awake is masculine. Heat, summertime as a season is more masculine. Wintertime is feminine. So it's oppositional. And the whole component of that, the whole teaching is that it seems like it's oppositional, like, you know, Paula Abdul, opposites attract. It seems like it's oppositional, but in reality, it's complementary because we cannot have one without the other. And we need that sort of opposite expression in order to know ourselves in one or the other. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so like intrigued and surprised because I would have thought the opposite as far as the colors. You know, I would have thought that feminine would be white and masculine would be dark, like black, dark. So that's,
tell me why, sis. What makes, like, what is the thought process behind that for you?
I guess, I mean, first of all, I love black. Like, I love wearing black. I like the night. But I guess I suppose that I have always considered women to be this like light, you know, thing, this like feather, this, especially like deeper, you know, especially like back then, people always considered a woman to just be light and, you know, not complicated, not dark. But I mean, and like I said, I love black. Oh, that's the dryer, sorry. I love black, and I don't know, that's just interesting to me. I just thought it would have been opposite.
So I think, thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. And what comes up that I guess we're going to kind of go into a little bit and talk about is you're right. In the past, and here we are going to start to kind of get into gender a little bit and like gender roles. Women have been portrayed or told that we do need to be delicate and light and soft and all of these things. Okay, well, let me tell you something. The original term, the original definition of virgin meant belonging to no man. So you can perceive that as I'm pure and I'm untouched because I've never been with a man, or you can perceive that as I belong to myself, I belong to no man. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a subtle shift in like, actually, I am not just pure and untouched, and this will cycle back around to the medicine wheel, and I'll clarify that in a minute. I'm not just, you know, pure and untouched. I'm also like a boss, and I do what I want, how I want, when I want. And I am emotional, and I am sort of wild, and I'm full of like this vivacious life. And I'm like the grandmother energy, the wise woman. I am very intelligent. So that's the nature of feminine energy. And to be honest with you, that is a lot of what I believe is really lacking in our world, is our relationship with our feminine expression, because feminine energy knows that it is not just one thing. So let's go back to masculine energy is very directed, like one thing. And if you think about like the symbology for like boys and girls, right? The male symbol is the circle with the arrow, like this is where we're going. This is what's happening, right? So necessary. We need that masculine expression, or else nothing's going to ever get done. Like we need that. However, let's think about the symbol for female, circle, and then and I say she, what is she doing? She's just like standing there, like holding space, right? But the extension is like one arm is going this way, one arm is going this way. So inherently in this very simple symbol is the wisdom, we're not just one thing. And that speaks to medicine wheel, because we are air, and we are fire, and we are water, and we are earth. And I teach a program called Essential Feminine, which really helps women get a better grasp on their feminine nature, which is sometimes I am in a motherhood space, which is very soft and tender and receiving, east direction. Sometimes I'm in a very like creative, powerful, fiery, sexual space, south direction. Sometimes I'm in a very community-based, sisterhood, emotional, like we're crying, we're supporting each other space. That's water, that's the west direction. And then sometimes I'm in the north, which is introverted, listening, quiet, really tuning into my like source connection to speak truth. So that is medicine wheel, that is specifically for the feminine expression. And that's ultimately goes back to what we had started out talking about, that's what I teach.
I love this. So I've always felt more connected to the feminine side, actually, everything you just described. But I'm wondering, how do we learn to balance both? Like, how do I learn to incorporate more of my masculine side into my everyday life?
Well, so let me ask you a question first. So is it that you want to incorporate more of your masculine, or do you want to be more comfortable and allowant of the power of your feminine? Or both? I mean, let's kind of dig into that a little bit.
Probably both. Like I might go through phases on when or how I feel more comfortable in my feminine side. Mm-hmm. But I guess in listening to what you were saying, even last night, I was finding for myself, like there are definitely parts about the masculine side that I felt like I need to be more direct. I need to take more of that power. And I don't have the tools. I wouldn't even know where to start with that.
Okay. So that's a great statement. And that's also a really great like awareness of self. I appreciate that. So my answer to that is, in order for us to be really powerful in our masculine expression, so in order for us to really make moves, ask for things, speak our truth, it must first be cultivated inward, which is the feminine. So I like to rock this like 80-20 rule of 80% of the time I'm in my feminine expression, because I'm observing, I'm listening, I'm going in to like check my shadows and check my ego and like do some work, so that I know that when I come out with my expression, which is just a masculine representation, that it's really grounded and founded in a feminine knowing. And that is something that we do not do right now. Right now, as a people, we're generally real reactive. We shoot off at the mouth constantly. We're blaming everybody else. We're like all outward. We are overly masculine right now.
It's like, thank you, social media, right?
Say it again, babe.
I said, thank you, social media. I mean, that is it's a blessing and a curse, social media, but I even myself have been privy to that. It's like, Sam, stop it.
Yeah, for sure. And so that brings me back to the symbology of that yin and yang symbol, which is that if you look at it, and I invite the two of you to go look up that symbol again to kind of like resonate in with it a little bit, but there's a point where each color kind of comes to a point and then the other one starts. Mm-hmm. So the teaching and the medicine of that is that excess masculinity will inevitably turn into femininity. or excess masculine energy will inevitably turn into feminine energy. Excess feminine will inevitably turn into masculine. So what that means is right now, you're so right, Sam. We are like on social media. We are just like, you know, popping off with no thought, no introspection. Well, so what happens? We do that repeatedly over and over and over. That's not a sustainable model. So inevitably, things are going to explode, and then we're going to have to like slow down and pick through the pieces and figure out what just happened. And what that means on a very like human practical application, you know, from a practical application standpoint, is that you're going to talk a bunch of shit, not you, but like the royal you, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk a bunch of shit, and then we're going to have to answer to it. And in order to answer to these things you may have just, you know, popped off about, you're going to have to go in and be like, shoot, I said that. How does that make me feel? Did I really mean that? Do I need to apologize? We have to go through this introspective process in order to.
That all the time, because I do believe what I'm a very vocal person, and sometimes like a little bit too much, but that's who I am. And I believe, you know, there's sometimes that my temper and my ego, you know, gets in the way for sure. And I'm very sensitive, you know, like for instance, with people that refuse to wear masks, like it's weird. It personally hurts my feelings, because I do that for other people, and I have an autoimmune disease, and I'm like, whoa, like, I feel like you're hurting me by making this statement, which I still kind of believe, but you know, to an extent, I'm just putting a lot of stuff out there, and I'm really trying to rein it in. But at the same time, I know that like I have a voice, and that's really important too. And from what you've described, that seems like that is the masculine side.
Yep, it is the masculine side. And what I, you know, invite you to do is to ask yourself, or spend time, and maybe you've already done this, you know, I you know, couldn't tell you, only you will know this, but spend some time investigating what is motivating the things that you're saying, or what is motivating you to put out what you're putting out, or even believe what you believe, honestly, because what comes to mind comes back to the medicine wheel reference, which is we all hold a certain space at a certain time, right? So you may be more in this place of like, hey, I need you to wear masks because of this reason. But then there's another person who's like, hey, listen, I'm not going to wear a mask because of this reason. And it's one of those things where it's like, so who's right and who's wrong? And is there a right or a wrong? And really, from a medicine wheel standpoint, what it invites us to get curious about is how attached we are to what we have deemed right or wrong, you know, not only for ourselves, but for others. And, you know, it's quite interesting to me that I could be here in, you know, Arizona on the Northern Hemisphere, and I'm like, man, it's so hot out, it's summertime. But then I'm talking to my homie in the Southern, I'm sorry, I don't know what I said. I meant to say Northern. If that's not what I said, that's what I meant. Talking to my homie in the Southern Hemisphere, and they're like, no, it's wintertime. They're in Australia, like, no, it's wintertime. I'm like, no, it is summertime. They're like, no, it is wintertime. Well, guess what? We're both right. You know, in the planet, it is both summer and winter at the same time, right? Wow. So things that are potentially and seemingly oppositional actually become very complementary, again, to speak to the whole sustainability of the organism, which sometimes is the planet, sometimes it's this body.
I always like to say there's like three sides to every story. There's your truth, there's someone else's truth, and then there's the truth.
Yeah.
And it's the truth is somewhere in the middle, I'm sure.
And the truth is ultimately that we're all things at once.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a wisdom of the feminine expression that we all, dare I say, could use a little bit better education in, you know, to allow ourselves to be both earth and fire, to allow ourselves to be both water and air at the same time, because we really are. We really, really are. And it's when we don't allow ourselves to be everything that we cause pain and we feel suffering, and, you know, we break our feet when we're spinning around listening to the voice.
Well, speaking of this pandemic, I mean, honestly, I laugh because I think, first of all, a year ago does not seem like a year ago. It seems, I was at Comic-Con like around this time last year, and I was having the freaking one of the best experiences of my life. And I always think, you know, if I was like some time traveler and I could go back a year and be like, Sam, a year from now, you know, shit's gonna get crazy. There's gonna be a global pandemic. People are going to be having to wear masks and you can't go anywhere, and you're going to have to go back to your mom's house in Ohio for a little bit to ride this thing out. And you know, it would blow your mind. Like, I don't even know if I would have believed it a year ago. So yeah. I know that you've done a lot of Instagram, like IGTV stuff talking about what's going on, which I think is freaking amazing and important. So what is your take on all of this? Like, what the hell is going on? And why, and will it better us at some point? How do we get on that track?
Ooh, girl, you're opening like the fiery spaces, which I want to honor in this moment, just like a moment of humanity, because what's happening right now, and these are the things that are happening constantly, but we don't slow down enough to really honor it and pay attention to it. So first thing I want to say is thank you for asking that. Like, thank you for the invitation of, hey, I'd like to know your thoughts and your opinion. What comes along with that is my own human conditioning of like, oh shit, can I tell the truth right now? Because if I tell the truth, Sam might get mad at me, or like, Sari might get mad at me, or you know what I mean? So like, there's that human thing of like, oh my God, what's gonna happen if I show up with all of me? And that is a human experience that we all have. We're like, oh man, will people reject me? Will they get angry at me? All of this and that. So again, no. That's the kind of stuff that's
we won't. Me and Sari are both very like, we have our opinions that we oftentimes agree with, but one of the reasons that we're journalists in the first place is to hear other people's opinions. And one of the reasons that we have this show is to bring a beautiful platter of opinions and ideas to people and have them see the whole story so they can make their own choice. So say whatever you want.
Appreciate that. So my personal belief is that the virus, COVID-19, is a real thing. I'm not one of those like conspiracy theorists, you know, it is real. But I don't believe what it means is true. And that's something that I talk a lot about and even ask myself a lot. Like, I know this feels real, but is it true? So my personal belief system is that we will physically manifest whatever it is that we've got going on mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. I come from this perspective, and it lines right up with the four seasons and whatnot of Medicine Wheel, that we actually have 4 bodies. So we have a physical body, which we're all pretty clear on, like we all, we have this, but there's also a mental body, an emotional body, and a spiritual body. And the job of our physical body is to bring forward for us the things that we may not be aware of mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So when I consider the virus that's going on, I would prefer to zoom out and look at what it is creating within us. So a few things. One is that everyone has been, at least initially, and kind of now, depending upon where you're at in the world, but has been forced home. Everyone has been sent like back to their home space because that's what we're being told, right? Well, okay. Everything to me is very metaphorical in nature. It's not just this linear thing. So home, and this goes back to the root chakra and our feet and our legs, right? So when you're forced home, you can't go to work, and like your kids are not in school, you are really forced to look at the home life that you have going on. Do you get along with your kids? Do you like your partner? Are you happy to be out of work, or are you missing work because you don't know how to exist outside of your job? Like, you are afforded all these opportunities to get really clear on like how you're rooting, how your foundation is built. So that's one piece of it. When it comes to how we're spending our money, right? Like it's so funny because for the work that I do, I've had clients leave that are like, man, I can't because COVID, I'm not working, I can't afford it. I'm like, cool, no worries. But then I've also had people be like, well, I'm not going to bars anymore and I'm not going out and partying, so I might as well spend this money somewhere that actually might help me in a different way. So I'm like, okay. So that right there is a really interesting like trade-off, an example of how people choose to perceive their physical experience. This also brings up a component of death, because we're really, I mean, that's really the big thing, is like death happens. And again, approaching life from a medicine wheel perspective, death is just winter time. And if we try to conceptualize it for a minute, if we look at winter as a season, what happens in winter? Well, things die. They go back into the earth, which is also what we do to people when they die, right? Or maybe we sprinkle their ashes places. So things go back into the earth. Things get really bare. Like life is kind of pared down. It becomes still. But what's happening under the surface during winter time? Under the frozen lakes and streams and ponds, in the frozen earth, you know, inside the trees where there are nests, with the animals when they're hibernating and they're dormant. What's happening? New life is burgeoning under the surface. So for me, death is just winter time. Death is transformation. Death is where we move from one particular form into another. Because what comes right after wintertime is springtime. That's that newness and that possibility. So I was just having this conversation with some students of mine, and we were really talking kind of really in depth about it. And one of my students asked, well, how would you feel if, you know, if your kids died from this? I'm like, well, to be completely honest, would I lose my shit and come apart in tears? Yes, I would. Would I experience pain as I perceive it? Yes, I would. Would I feel completely convicted and knowing that it's part of the transformation process on an energetic level? Yes, I would. And when I am able to acknowledge both the energetic, larger, more metaphysical existence, and the operative word here being and, not if or but, none of that. This and that, when I allow myself to be both things at the same time, then I don't suffer. I'm fully present to my human experience, and I'm fully present to the spiritual experience, which is that sometimes things have to evolve. You know, jobs change, relationships change, you know, relationships die, you know, jobs die, like certain things, like it's a life cycle. And when it's complete, it's complete. And I actually prefer to view it as a gratitude thing, like, hey, thanks for transitioning and opening up space, because you're going to be reborn in some form or fashion in the healing of our new planet and our new humanity and our new existence.
So interesting.
Wow. I love that. I think that's incredible. I wonder, you know, like, I have a very hard time with change. Everything that you just said made perfect sense to me. I'm 100% with you. I'm wondering, you know, why do people hang on to things like that? I mean, you know, certainly I feel, and it was interesting when you said that about the winter, because I do feel like that in the winter. We were just talking about seasons, and that's exactly how I feel in the winter. And I have a very hard time with change, even knowing that it's for the better. So what can we do? Like, what are some things that someone like me could do to, you know, I'm a big picture person as it is, but when it comes to something like that, it's really hard for me to see the big picture or want to go with the flow to abide by the big picture.
Yeah. Great question. Well, you can sign up for Medicine Wheel and I will help show you.
Yay!
And listen, if we start kicking it together more frequently, you will get sick of how often I say and.
I love that. I love that.
Well, you'll get sick of how often I say like, so.
It'll be a trade-off. So doing your inner work. And generally speaking, what I am aware of is we as a people, as a humanity, we prefer to have like, hey, what's like the quick answer? What's like the quick fix to this? Hey, what's the like, how can I move through this real fast? Well, that's because our brains are attached to time in a linear way. So we feel like we have to hurry up and get things done in a certain way or a certain form, or it's very restrictive, which again is overly masculine. So in order, when you say, what can we do? We need to get back into our body. The human being, the headspace is more masculine in nature. The rest of the body, and this also speaks to like the 80-20 thing I was telling you about, our body kind of takes up more space than our head does. but our head is always leading the way, and our head is full of conditioning, stories, rhetoric from our past, from our culture, from our society, from our religious upbringing, from whatever. So our head is like an archive of past experiences. However, our body operates on a purely vibrational level. So what that means on a, again, practical human application way, we always feel something first, and then we bring it up to our brain to decide what that feeling means. So feeling excited or feeling deaf is going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people based on the story that they're ascribing to in their head. So when you ask me, what can we do? We do the inner work. And again, that's a feminine expression, going into our hearts, into our painful places, our shadows. We have to do our inner work, because when we are more in our body, more embodied or empowered from this place, we show up differently out there. And when we show up differently out there, that's when we start to really tip the scales of humanity. And we really are able to operate from a heart-centered place instead of a logical mindset, overtly, and what I like toxically masculine place. People talk about toxic masculinity all the time. I mean, the whole Me Too, all of this. It is not an accident that, patriarchy and toxic masculinity is showing up at the same time as race inequalities and these power struggles. Like these are parallels here, y'all. And it's all because it is an overt masculine expression. We need to get back to our feminine expression, which is back to our body, which is go in and do your inner work so you can be more on point out there.
On that note, it's just so crazy. It feels like everything is happening at once, and it's just a giant shitstorm. And
yep.
and it's you're like, wait, this thing isn't related, and this thing isn't related. But at the same time, if you really dig deep and do the work, all of these things are related that are happening. Things are coming to the light. Things are. It's like cancel culture. No, I'm not a fan of cancel culture. But with that being said, if cancel culture is about people that truly needed to be canceled, that were doing great injustices in this world, then I'm here for some of that. So as far as everything, the Black Lives Matter movement, our health, this child pedophilia ring, which is like basically trending 24/7 now. I mean, there's things that are going to come out about this. I dearly hope they don't hold it from the public and just take it and underground and not tell people. But there's proof of all these. And then the Me Too movement, it feels like started this a few years ago. Why was it a domino effect that one person stands up and they're like, well, I felt this and this happened to me? How did this all start to happen at once, do you think?
That is such a wonderful awareness and observation. And I believe that we can all identify with that in our personal lives, right? We've all had experiences where we're like, oh my God, my entire life is coming apart. I lost my job and I broke up with my man and my kid got, chicken pox. What is happening? Everything is breaking down. So it's very accurate that everything is coming apart at the same time. And the reason, or there's a lot to it ultimately, it's hard to articulate in just a few minutes, but what is true is that when one person stands up and tells their truth, it sends out this ripple effect. And because we are all energetic beings, and we could go on for hours, and I could go on for hours about what that means and how we're all connected and all of these different things, but what you know to be true, and I invite you to consider this in your own personal lives, is that if you know someone who, even if you're in an argument with someone, and if that person comes to you and says, look, I'm sorry, this is what I did wrong, this was my fault, I own it, if they speak to their mistake, immediately you are softened to now speak to how you showed up inappropriately. So that happens on a personal level, and therefore it happens on a grander scale, because everything in our world exists from a micro to macro space. So one person stands up, or the Me Too movement is like, yo, we're going to call this out. We're not going to allow this. We're not going to let this go discussed anymore. So what happens is that energetically, there's this ripple that has been sent out into our humanity. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. When injustice is occurring, we need to say something. We start tuning in to these different frequencies, like we were talking about in the beginning. We start tuning into these different experiences, which on a multitude of levels opens us up to the ways in which injustice may have gone on in our personal life, which then ultimately, like you said, Sam, it creates a domino effect. So, once you know, you can't unknow. And that's a good thing. A lot of times these days, people have been saying things like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's not necessarily that that's true. It's always been this bad. We just have been anesthetized to what has really been going on under the surface. So now we're just like seeing it all. It's like when you realize you're in an abusive relationship, all of a sudden you remember the years of red flags that you have ignored. Guess what? This is what's happening for us. We are realizing and becoming aware of all the things that we have ignored in our culture, in our society, and in our humanity for centuries. Yeah.
How do you see things shifting? Like, do you think there are enough people that are aware to make that fundamental change?
Hands down, there are enough people. Hands down. Because the power of love is far greater than the power of fear. So it will actually, from a numerological standpoint, take less humans to tip the scales. We just have to believe in love the way we believe in separation or fear or whatever. And like that, and so that's what I'm here for. And that's what you girls are here for. Like, that's what we're doing here. Like the three of us, the power of the conversation of the three of us is far greater than a conversation of hate amongst 20 people. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's important that people hear that and know that the power of love and healing and forgiveness is far greater than anything else.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about shadow work, because it's something that is a term that I hear a lot, but I guess I'm not necessarily understanding like what that means, what that is. Who is your shadow? What is your shadow? And are you trying to get rid of that? Like what does that mean?
Great question. What we are trying to do with our shadows is we are trying to integrate them. I personally believe, and so this is the place from which I teach and speak, I never want to push anything away from me, because anytime I have this headspace of I'm pushing this away, it just perpetuates separation. And I don't want to do that, because that's counterproductive to the overall goal of healing and oneness. So we want to integrate our shadows. And let's think about what a shadow is. A shadow is just an absence of light. So there's a light, something gets in the way, and it creates a shadow, right? So all we have to do is remove the thing that's in the way, and all you have is light. So shadow work consists of the things in our life that we don't want to look at. Shadow work consists of the relationship that I was in when I cheated on that person. Shadow work consists of the lie that I told. Shadow work consists of things that were perpetrated upon me that I don't want to talk about, So there's shadow work are just the painful parts of our existence, both personally and globally. And when we talk about it's an absence of light, most of the time, in fact, if not all the time, what it means to bring light to the shadows is to literally take your view and like go look at it. So we bring our light, our awareness to this thing that we have up until this point tried to shut the door on and turn our back on. So as soon as we turn and bring our light, our awareness, our attention onto those painful, shadowy parts, it immediately changes it. And that is something that is not a woo spiritual thing. That is a quantum physics thing that is provable, that says as soon as our attention is brought to a thing, the activity of the thing now changes. So there's that.
I'm so glad you brought up quantum physics, because that is what I hang my hat on. I speak to Sam about that all the time, and actually doing that work. I mean, that was, you are right. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, and that speaks to that, we're all connected thing, because quantum physics also tells us we're actually more space than we are matter. So granted, my body may seem really dense, and it may seem like Sam's there and Sari's there, and there's this separation, but actually we're more space than we are matter, which is why we feel each other, which is why it doesn't matter where you are. I can still feel you, Sam, and I can still feel you, Sari. You know what I mean? Like, we can feel each other because we are vibration and energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say, to your point, every great level up I have ever made in my life came after doing shadow work. It came after facing that and letting that light in, and it was like the universe just put me where I was supposed to go after that.
And that is always the way. That is always the way, in my experience. Like, I know what I know, and I am where I am. But so far, what I have learned is that love is always the answer. And as soon as we bring our light to that shadow, everything is always better.
Love is my superpower, is what I always say.
Yes. I love, what I always say is, I'm like, love was my first love. Like, I love love. That is my jam. That is my jam.
One of the last things I want to talk to you about, even though this might seem like a dark note to end on, but I want to make it light, is death, and how you can really explain to me. You talked a little bit about it before, but how to help people not be afraid of death, and what you think really is like happening through that, like what you see, whether it's the other side or another dimension. How can you calm people's nerves about dying?
Gosh, thank you for asking that. That's such an important question. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of like, oh, this is kind of like a heavy topic. And based on what we've discussed, the best stuff comes out of our willingness to go into the heavy spaces and the perceived scary, uncomfortable places. So I love that we're going to end on this, actually. And I really, I'm going to speak really tenderly about this and from my heart, not because I haven't been up until this point, but it's important that we acknowledge how weighty this is for a lot of people. So the first thing that comes to mind is this text, this spiritual text that I study called A Course in Miracles. And I don't know if either of you have heard of it, but it is an incredible piece of work that I've studied for years and years and years, and really did two things. It gave me permission to believe what I have always intuitively believed to be true. It just put it in this really beautiful application. So it was very validating. And then it also expanded on that. And one of the things that it says from this body of work is that death is the reward for a life well lived. Because when we are in our physical bodies, we are on the physical plane, which means we have to pay bills and go to work and feed ourselves and deal with family issues and experience human things. And sometimes human things are painful. And what do people say? They're in a better place now, or they're no longer, if someone's sick or diseased, they're, they're free from that now. They're free from the burden that is the heaviness and the density of the human experience. Now, that does not mean that inherently the human experience is bad. Quite the opposite. I love being a human. I love being able, and for me personally, I can sort of be in the 3D and the 5D at the same time. I kind of flex into these various spaces, but the human experience affords us a lot of beautiful feelings. So if we can think of death as a release from our physical attachment, that's ultimately what it is. And really in the human experience, and that's a lot of what's going on right now, is we're really attached to our physical existence. We only think that we are alive if we are in this body speaking to each other. When in reality, to go back to the quantum physics space, we are energetic frequencies, and energy can never be created or destroyed. It just sort of evolves into something else. It just transforms. So, when people feel connected to their loved ones who have transitioned, that's real. That's true. When people have these near-death experiences, that's real. That's true. Again, one of our biggest misconceptions there, and therefore attachments, is that our physical existence is all that there is. And it's just not. It is just not. So if we can get curious about our attachments to physical things, which hits on this COVID stuff, we've all had to really check some of our attachments and how attached we are to our life in certain ways. When we can get curious about what it is that we are attached to, and when we can start looking at what suffering that might be creating for us, again, we bring our awareness, our attention to this thing that's creating some pain, then it frees it, it lightens it, and we are no longer burdened by that attachment. So it's really an incredible possibility, and again, it's wintertime, it's the threshold where something dies, and then how often does someone die and then a new baby in the family is born, right? That shit happens all the time.
You want to know one of the most interesting things, I don't actually think I've shared this on the show or shared this with you, Sari, is that the month I was born, my dad's mother, my grandmother, she died, and my brother had his bar mitzvah. And so like literally within 3 to 4 weeks. And I mean, my poor parents were getting gifts for like Shiva, having my dad's mother die, my brother's having his bar mitzvah, and I'm a newborn baby that was just brought into this world. And so I actually never, obviously never knew, I can't remember my grandmother. But every psychic medium I've seen has always said that you guys had some kind of soul transfer.
Absolutely.
And that she has been with you the whole time. And because I would go to a medium and I'd know other people that died and I would expect them to be there. But they were like, no, this is your grandmother on your father's side. And I'm thinking, I didn't even know her. And
you didn't know her, Sam. You didn't know her.
I didn't know her, like, in my memory.
Yeah.
But then once I started opening up my brain, my mind, and really discovering all the spiritual stuff, I was like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, oh my God, she has been with me this whole time. She's my biggest supporter. I know. So it's really cool. Well, Olivia, this has been friggin' awesome.
Yes. Can we, before we even end, can we get a look at your shirt? I really want to see the bottom half of your shirt.
Okay, yes. This is one of my favorite. Okay, so real talk, this is one of my favorite shirts. And hold on, let's see.
Yes!
Half queen, half crazy, all woman. And that's a shout out to a poet out of Philly. His name is Just Mike the Poet. Go follow him on IG. His work is amazing, but it's a perfect cap to all the things we've talked about, because we are all things. We are this and that. It's not an if or a but or none of that. This and that.
Well, Olivia, tell us where everybody can find you and perhaps take your course and do all of the work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So you can find me on IG, Live Only Love, and it's Live as in like L-I-V, because that's my nickname is Liv. Live Only Love, and the link to the Medicine Wheel program is in my bio. You can go to oliviahalliday.com and find all the things, the Medicine Wheel, one-on-one coaching, all kinds of different programs and offerings. And for anyone who wants to inquire or even just know more, send me an email, go ahead and slide into my DMs if you want to, and I'll respond to you in that way as well.
Awesome. Well,
oh my gosh.
Such a pleasure, right, Sarah?
Yes. I just want to say an extra special thank you. I've absolutely loved talking to you today. We have to do this again with some more wine.
Yes.
Hands down. I will be ready next time. Girl, give me a heads up and I will make sure. It might be wine, or I don't know. Do you guys, or it's okay if I have some Hennessy? Is that all right?
Please.
Can I have that too?
You bring the Hennessy, I'll bring the tequila. It'll be a party.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'm in for it.
And guys, you all are amazing. We want to hear your stories. Like, comment, DM us, whatever. You can find myself, Sam Davidson, at SamD43 on Twitter and Instagram, the beautiful Sari Cohen at The Savvy Scribbler, and our own show, Spiritual Spiral Show on Instagram. And you can find us there on YouTube, on podcasts with Apple, Google, like Spotify, everything. And this has been an absolute pleasure and a great way to start our weekend. This is a pre-tape, guys, so we are going into the weekend. But we love you all. And if you go to any of the people that we have interviewed or recommend, please tell them that, you found them through us, because it's always nice to know that. So everyone have an amazing week, and we'll see you next time.
See you next
Thanks,
time.
ladies.